Hi team, in this video we are going to look at relative prices and you need to be able to explain their role in the allocation of resources. So to get started, here's your bog standard definition. So we're referring to the price level of one good or service in comparison to another. So we've always talked about prices as singular. We might look at a phone and say the phone is worth $500. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare products to each other in terms of their price. So we're going to say, okay, maybe one phone is worth half a laptop, or maybe one vehicle is worth 10 bikes. So basically trying to understand the relative value of one good or service in comparison to another. This is important mostly for producers because they're interested to know where the profitability is, okay? So changes in relative price signal to producers to go and investigate markets. And then from there, they determine profitability and how to best allocate their scarce resources. We'll unpack that in a little bit more detail. Okay, so here's an example. So you've got hand sanitizer and you've got gin, okay? I'm using this example because during COVID, this actually happened for a lot of producers of alcohol. So hand sanitizer became quite expensive overnight, obviously because there was a huge increase in demand during the pandemic. So let's assume there was an increase in price by 25%. And then let's also assume that the price of gin didn't move. It stayed the same, okay? So the price of gin stays the same, but the price of hand sanitizer moves up by 25%. Now, assume that you're a gin producer, all right, and suddenly this other product that's actually quite easy for you to make, right? The setup and the systems for hand sanitizers and alcohols are quite similar, okay? What do you do next? You could continue to produce gin, but is there a chance you might pivot some or maybe all of your production towards this other thing that suddenly is going to make you more money? Have a think about that. Okay, so this is the market for hand sanitizer, and like I just said before, huge increase in demand as we can see on a normal market mechanism. So during the pandemic, there was an increase in the price of hand sanitizer. This caused the demand curve to shift to the right, and it leads to an increase in price and an increase in the relative price of hand sanitizer compared to other products. So on the one hand, there's an increase in price that doesn't change. Whenever you see an increase in price, assume that that also leads to an increase in relative price. This product is now more expensive relative to other products, provided the price of all those other products stays the same, which we assume, okay? Hence, the price signal causes producers to investigate the market. So whenever there's changes in prices, producers go in and they have a look around. It's their job. They want to make sure that they're at the forefront of obviously maximizing their profit as much as they can. And upon realizing that there's opportunities for more profit, many producers switched to producing hand sanitizers. And I've got in brackets, particularly distilleries, where the process of producing alcohol and hand sanitizers is very similar. So there's a level of practicality here too, right? Not everyone's going to get into the hand sanitizer game if they don't have the land, labour, capital and enterprise to support it. But if you are a distillery, this was actually quite simple, and it happened. Hence, resources were reallocated towards the production of hand sanitizers to maximise profits and best satisfy the wants and needs of society. Okay, so relative prices, what are we doing here? We're trying to understand how it leads to changes in price signals that then incentivize producers to make certain decisions to maximize their profits that ultimately lead to a reallocation of resources that best satisfy the wants and needs of society. Remember, wind it back to Economics 101. We are here to maximize the wants and needs of society. That's, you know, the fundamental economic problem, the basic economic problem, unlimited wants and needs versus limited resources, and trying to best maximize living standards as best we can, all right? So relative prices are important because they act as that signal that ultimately leads to that cascade of intervention that then supports the improvements in the wants and needs of society. Okay, so the theory piece isn't too hectic. That's really it. But you do need to understand how to answer the question, and the questions in this space are somewhat predictable, but kind of heavy. It's never just a 2 or 3 marker. It's always a little bit more. So I wanted to show you this one to give you a sense of what's going on. So in a competitive market, explain how an increase in demand for a product might result in a change in relative price, and explain how this would influence resource allocation for 4 marks. So there's quite a lot of work to do here. 4 marks, 90 seconds per mark, give yourself 6 minutes. So what are we going to do? Like any other question, we're going to set the scene. We're going to start by telling the examiner what relative prices are, and that is done through a simple definition, okay? 1 mark with your eyes shut. Make sure you know your definition. The next thing we're going to do is answer the second part of the question. We want to explain how the increase in the demand leads to a change in relative price. So So explain how an increase in demand leads to a change in price. All right, so similar to here, we said this causes the demand curve to shift to the right, leads to an increase in price. That's fine. And then the link to the increase in the relative price. Now, it's a really good idea, although the question doesn't require it, it's a really good idea to incorporate an example so that if you are sort of struggling to explain this theoretically, you've got something you can attach your idea to, and I'll show you how you could do that in a moment. The third part is you need to explain how the change in relative prices creates price signals that cause the producer to investigate the market, thus realizing improved profitability. There is a way to do that is, a bit of a cookie cutter sentence, but it does the job, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then you want to finish it off by outlining that scarce resources are then going to be reallocated towards those products that offer obviously greater profits and ultimately satisfy the wants and needs of society. So this is how you could do it. I've started off with my definition, and then I've said if there is an increase in the demand for a product, it creates a shortage at its original price level, putting upward pressure on price. This also leads to an increase in the relative price of this product where it becomes more profitable compared to others. Now, the back end of that sentence is pretty important. It's one thing to say that, yeah, obviously there's an increase in relative price. Well, what does that mean? It means that suddenly this product is more profitable compared to others. Now, I've got an example because that helps me to explain what's going on. So, for example, during the global pandemic, the demand for face masks increased, leading to an increase in relative price. The relative price compared to other products. Next part of the sentence, hence this signal to producers to investigate the market in search of profit-making opportunities where the production of face masks allowed for greater profits. Now, this was that sentence I was telling you about, but notice how I've got my example embedded in it. It allows me to change or mold the response question by question so that I can make sure that it fits and that it's mine. And then the last part, producers respond to these price signals by reallocating scarce resources towards the production of face masks in order to maximize profits and best satisfy the wants and needs of society. So for 4 marks, guys, this is your step-by-step explanation. It's certainly not something to rote learn. What I've done here is just broken down the specific demands of the question. And note, it's a big question. You've got to explain one part and then you've got to explain another part. It's massive. If it's helpful to you, put brackets around the 2 sneaky questions that are actually in this one question to help you determine where the marks are. And finally, guys, a numerical example to finish this off. So we've got 2 products, milk and cigarettes, and we've got 2011 and 2012. And you can see that milk has remained constant at $2 and cigarettes has increased from $15 to $20. The question asks us, what has happened to the relative price of milk during this time? Now, be really mindful. The question asks for the relative price of milk, not the relative price of cigarettes. So we need to form a relationship between these 2 products from one year to the next. And to do that, we're going to pull out our scientific calculators, which we are allowed to have in our SACs and our exams, and come up with a numerical figure as to how these products are related to each other. So milk relative to cigarettes is 2 to 15. So 2 divided by 15 in 2011 is equal to approximately 0.13. Okay? So in 2011, 1 litre of milk could afford me approximately 0.13 units of cigarettes, okay? Hopefully this makes sense in a moment, is when you compare that to 2012, it changes. So 2 divided by 20 gives me 0.1. So in 2012, I was able to afford, for $2 in milk, I can then purchase up to 0.1 of a packet of cigarettes. Now compare 0.13 in 2011 to 0.1 in 2012. What happened to the relative price of milk over that time? Well, it's decreased. All right, so the answer is D. Thank you.